I wanted to thank the committee members, Richard Abel, Heather Hendershot, Rick Altman, and Sarah Benet Weiser for working on this with me. It was a pleasure to be in this position to look at so many people who are extraordinary scholars and to choose Michele Hilmes. For her exemplary lifelong contributions through research, teaching, and service, Michele Hilmes is the recipient of this SCMS Distinguished Career Achievement Award. Professor Emerita in the Department of Communication Arts at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Dr. Hilmes is a path-breaking scholar of broadcast studies. Her archival and interpretive methods helped formulate new approaches to the history of broadcasting as an industry, its programming and audiences, and it probed related questions about gender, race, ethnicity, nationalism, globalism, and sound technology. She's the author of 4 books, has edited 5 anthologies with an additional 2 forthcoming, and has published over 40 essays. Her first book, Hollywood and Broadcasting from 1990, offered compelling new ways to think about, to think about relations between Hollywood cinema and the broadcast industry from radio to cable TV. Her groundbreaking radio voices, Where am I? Okay. Brought radio studies into conversation with feminist theory in really important ways. Her more recent book, Network Nations, contributes significant new insights into the transnational history of British and US broadcasting. And Dr. Hilmes' Only Connect, now in its 4th edition, is a standard textbook for broadcast history courses across the nation. Dr. Hilmes' accomplishments are similarly impressive in the areas of service, mentorship, and archiving. She served for 7 years as the director of the Wisconsin Center for Film and Theater Research, and is a research associate and conference organizer for the Library of Congress's Radio Preservation Task Force. Dr. Hilmes has guided the careers of dozens of successful students, chairing some 27 PhD dissertations. And in the nomination letter for this award, her colleagues praise her legendary mentorship and unsurpassed intellectual generosity. She has served on prominent editorial, awards, and conference boards. Throughout her career, she's been an active member of SCMS committees, including the board of directors. Dr. Hilmes is the first scholar of broadcasting to receive, So, the first one to receive the Distinguished Career Achievement Award, which makes this a milestone year not only for Michele, but also for SCMS. On behalf of the awards committee, I offer Michele our warm and enthusiastic congratulations for this well-deserved honor.
Very nice. There we go. Well, thank you so much. I never thought when I went to my first SCS conference in 1985 and watched the other people get these awards that I would ever be standing up here for this. So thank you. I have to get myself back together here. Thank you very much, Lynn, for that introduction. And thanks so much to the committee, who I know this is a big decision. It's a hard one to make. I really am so gratified and honored to be here and to know that scholars whose work I admire so much have gone into this decision. Thank you, Lynn, Rick Altman, Richard Abel, Heather Hendershot, Sarah Bandit-Weiser. Really, how kind of you, and what an honor. And then, the next thing, I want to give a big virtual hug to the people who were behind my nomination. The incredibly kind and energetic group, colleagues, past and present, former graduate students, and friends from all over. And there are, yes, 27 advisees. I hadn't counted them up quite like that, but I know many of you are here tonight, and I would love to read everyone's names, but I think that would probably that would keep us from getting to the reception, right? I know this took a lot of time and effort, and I'm immensely grateful. My particular gratitude goes to Jonathan Gray, Andrew Bottomley, and Bill Kirkpatrick for spearheading this nomination. But I know it built on many other people's contributions, such as the lovely retirement tribute podcast you all produced 2 years ago, and I thank you again for your kindness and generosity of spirit. It's really amazing. Tonight, thinking about all this, what I'd like to talk about is communities, what it means to build one, like we have here at SCMS, the ones we built in graduate school, in our respective departments, or by virtue of shared research interests. We all belong to many communities. Now, we in the humanities tend to be lone wolves of a sort, turning out our much-vaunted single-authored articles and monographs, unlike our colleagues in the social sciences. But gatherings like this one make it obvious that each one of us relies vitally on communities of knowledge, of association, of friendship. These are the relationships that make us who we are and that move our work forward, that keep it alive. What I think is really amazing about this field of cinema and media studies that we're all engaged in is how much it has changed and grown since emerging in the 1960s. Expanding its focus from cinema alone in the early days when cinema studies was new, to the inclusion of television and screen and sound media more generally in the 1970s and 80s, leading eventually to the addition of that M in SCMS. I think that was 2002. I had to look it up. To the profound changes wrought over the last 20 years by digital media. I feel really fortunate, and I don't know quite how this was, a matter of timing, I suppose, to come along at a time when my work spanned all those areas, and sometimes I feel like I've been riding this wave from one thing to another as it became possible to do. To see all of them emerge and become important components of today's academic community and today's understanding of the world around us. And I'm grateful to have had colleagues and a community at every step of the way guiding and supporting me. When I went to Indiana University in 1971, I had absolutely no clue what I was going to major in, and I had absolutely no idea what graduate school even was, having come from a non-college educated family. But as it turned out, I was there at the right time. Not only did I encounter one of the truly the kindest and most generous mentors an undergrad could have, Jim Naramore, who I know many of you know, who not only did I take my first film class from Jim, but he nominated me for an undergraduate teaching internship, I think sometime right around in there. I won't mention any more dates. Forget those. Forget I said that. And that let me be sort of like a junior TA. I got to hang out with the two real TAs. And although I was perfectly useless to the class, to me it made a huge difference just to know that, oh, this is what graduate school is like. Maybe I could do this. I think also, I brag about this all the time, people who know me have heard me say this before, they had just started a film concentration in the comparative literature department at IU, I think my junior year, and I signed up for that immediately. Somehow it all came together. I knew that was what I wanted to do. And I think I was, and it's one of those things nobody has disproved yet, so I'm going to say it. The first person to do an undergraduate honors thesis in film at IU. And I remember that because I had to argue for it. Like, yes, film is an acceptable topic for an undergraduate honors thesis. Guess what it was on? The auteur theory, right? It would have to be, but anyway, that was a great experience. It got me into writing a piece over 2 semesters, and I thought again, yes, okay, grad school. Between graduating from Indiana and applying to NYU, two key things happened, and not just to me. First of all, and here I go, a little technological determinist. I'm going to get back to that with someone else I'm going to mention in a minute who's in the room. First, it's the VCR. The VCR debuted. You might remember that moment. I certainly do. Many of you don't remember it at all. But this was a key moment to introduce television into the cinema studies fold, because finally you had a machine that could stop that continuous flow of television, could fix it, could let us examine it and analyze it. And this happened that was the one factor. The other one, for me, and I think for many of us, was related to someone else there, Bob Sklar, and his groundbreaking book, Movie Made America, which inspired me to want to do a kind of a cultural history that I hadn't read before, that helped me to put together things that I'd been thinking about, like identity and film and cities and national identity. And those two things, here's the great confluence. Bob Sklar was at NYU. He had a VCR. This was unusual. I'm not going to mention a date, but if I did, you'd be surprised that he had one by then. And he set about teaching the first seminar in television that had been taught at NYU. And it was, we had to go to his loft for the seminar once a week because it weighed 60 pounds. I mean, you couldn't bring it into the department. And let me tell you, for somebody from Indianapolis, just the whole idea of going to a loft in Soho was so exciting. Never mind the VCR, but it was a great class. And I don't know if anybody from that class is in the audience tonight. Anybody? I don't know, I'm having a hard time remembering who my classmates were. It was my first semester, and everything was pretty interesting and strange. Though Bob himself never claimed to be a cultural studies scholar, he was a cultural historian whose embedding of cinema into the culture of everyday life, set in the context of an evolving nation, guided many of the intellectual paths my life has taken and that our field has been influenced by. Television studies finally had the technology and the critical moment it needed to emerge, and I really wish that Bob were here tonight to share this with us all. A bit later, another key figure happened to appear on the NYU scene, and that is Brian Winston. And Brian happens to be sitting here in the audience tonight, much to my surprise. I didn't know he would be here. Brian brought not only an incredible amount of energy, but a really unique and more political take on British television in particular, whose connection of political economy, if I can call it that, and also the connection to technology and culture certainly brought a new set of concerns that influenced me. And he was also associated with, at that moment, that other influence from across the Atlantic, the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies at Birmingham. And here, for many of us in the U.S., this moment, the mid-'80s, marked the, I said a date, no, but that's just a general date, marked the emergence of cultural studies, and with it a new set of tools with which to study media. Television in particular, given its rootedness in the everyday. Less a discipline than an approach to many different disciplines, cultural studies provided the necessary theoretical grounding for television studies to rise as a field of study, as many of us in this room remember well. It set the conditions for us to begin to apply feminist theory, critical race theory, queer theory to the study of media. It caused controversy, but it opened up the field. And significantly, this period, the 80s, is also when we see the rise, I have to stop that, I know, see the rise of critical industry studies. And this is, I want to, call out this because we don't often think about it. We take it for granted. We've always had industry studies in the field. But critical industry studies really had its major forward thrust in the 1980s. And I'm very lucky to have intersected with two brilliant women at NYU whose work in that area influenced me so much. Janet Wasco, who taught a history seminar and ordered us into the archives. Don't come back with a paper that doesn't have archival research in it. It won't be accepted. That was the first for me, and it made a huge impact. And also Janet Steiger, whose pioneering classic Hollywood cinema with David Bordwell and Kristen Thompson had just come out, and who also served on my dissertation committee and made an enormous difference there. So this brings me to Madison, Wisconsin, and the astonishingly productive and supportive community there. And also to a longtime friend and mentor whose influence I cannot overstate, Tino Ballio, who was not only doing media industry studies before most of us had even thought of it, but whose leadership of the Wisconsin Center for Film and Theater Research over decades built up many of the collections that all of us, most of us here, have benefited from since. And I don't know if Tino is in the audience tonight, he might be, but I'd like to give a moment of recognition for Tino Ballio and his work. Thank you. I remember sitting in my home office in the obscurity of Mobile, Alabama, where I was living at the time, one summer day, when the phone rang and a voice said, "This is Tino Ballio. I'm editing a volume on Hollywood in the Age of Television. Would you like to contribute a chapter?" This was like being discovered at Schwab's lunch counter. I began to feel that maybe I did have a career as a scholar. A few years later, another call came, this time from Vance Kepley. Would I be interested in a visiting semester in Madison to replace the irreplaceable Lynn Spiegel? I never succeeded in replacing Lynn, but I did try, to at least pick up some of what she had been involved in, and what a project that was. Besides famed film scholars like Vance, David Bordwell, Kristen Thompson, Leah Jacobs, Julie Daci was there doing feminist work on television, and of course John Fisk, who inspired a generation of television scholars. I cannot say enough about the challenging yet nurturing community that Madison has provided me over the last several decades. So many wonderful colleagues, including present ones like Jonathan Gray, Derek Johnson, Lori Lopez, Jeremy Morris, Eric Hoyt, and the fabulous graduate students who have passed through our program and now are teaching others all over the world. They have taught me so much and had such influence on every bit of work I've undertaken that I really can't credit you all enough. And thanks in no small part to such an adventurous intellectual community, as well as to the unparalleled resources in the Madison archives, my own work swung further towards yet another media studies frontier, towards radio and the nearly forgotten history of radio broadcasting. Sound media have now entered their second golden age, people are saying these days, sparked by the advent of digital media. What the VCR was to TV studies, the MP3 file has been to sound studies. And it's good to see SCMS embracing this phenomenon, with many panels and SIGs devoted to sound, increasing all the time. And here I want to put in a plug for a somewhat endangered community that SCMS has long nurtured, media historians. Yeah, let's hear it for the media historians. Lately, in the rush to embrace digital media, it seems like media history has been left in the dust, at least when it comes to job postings. I sincerely hope this changes, allowing the current new medium to be put in conversation with the older new media from which it derives. And as many of you have heard me say, history begins now. So we're really all historians. Let's just hire more people in that specific field, now that we're over our sort of digital rush, our new media rush. Not that it should be over, I don't mean to say that. And history requires careful attention to maintaining the media archive, something else that SCMS has strongly advocated. We can see it in the current, just in the nick of time, rescue of the long neglected American radio archive. And I hope some of you might have attended the Wednesday special workshop, Listening to History, Sound, Memory, and Preservation in the Digital Age, that was organized by Josh Shepard and Andrew Bottomley. It brought together archivists from the Smithsonian, the Library of Congress, NPR, the Studs Terkel Archives, to all in the project of radio preservation, along with many of today's leading sound scholars. And let me just say, if you did miss it and you'd like to try and see some of those people, talk to them again, the Radio Studies SIG meeting tomorrow, I think at 1 o'clock, they'll be back, so little announcement. I hope, am I right about that? I hope, good, okay. Locating and preserving the radio archive is a project essential to bringing the neglected critical history of sound work fully into our critical consciousness. And where else could it happen but at SCMS? I want to focus now on this particular community, a community that has defined and shaped our field, has educated us as all as scholars, that brings us together in myriad ways and holds up the tradition of critical media study and education in the United States and around the world. The Society for Cinema and Media Studies has established itself as the foremost institution in the world, I think it's fair to say, dedicated to a critical, cultural, humanities-based study of film and media, a task more important now than it has ever been. And I want to repeat that word, humanities. Never more so, good. Thanks. Never more so than in our current cultural and political climate, I believe we must stand up proudly for what we in the humanities bring to the study of media and what the study of media brings to the humanities. Not only are the humanities a field of intellectual endeavor that is under threat in universities increasingly focused on STEM disciplines, but in this period when the relationship between media and power has taken center stage as never before, to champion the cause of critical analysis is more vital than ever. In this era of alternative facts, where actual events seem not to matter and little things like evidence are routinely dismissed, the careful analysis of the way that knowledge is produced, circulated, and discussed, and the importance of assessing truth, acknowledging both its power and its fragility, are particularly needed. As are historians in particular. Using the past to validate narrow, distorted views of the present is a tactic that is swirling all around us today, taking on its own kind of false reality. We need historians to call out such distortions for what they are, and to insist upon a past that is complicated, contested, diverse. And we need media scholars to push back against simple condemnations of the media from either side of today's politics, a task that requires the historical and critical perspective that we scholars are uniquely qualified to provide. SCMS is just the flexible and progressive organization to do this, as indeed it has done for over 50 years. Starting out as a small group, promoting a controversial, struggling scholarly area in one national context, it's grown increasingly transnational and transmedial, crossing borders and platforms and taking a larger role on the world stage. Rather than walling itself off in a disciplinary cocoon, SCMS has continually expanded and enlarged its focus, embracing interdisciplinarity and a wide range of critical approaches. So, thanks. Thanks to all of you who've helped to make this happen over the years. Everyone who's presented a paper, organized a panel, served on a committee, edited or reviewed for the journal, served on the board. In particular, thanks to those who've given up acres of their personal lives to actually help run this organization. It takes a tremendous effort, and the rewards often take place behind the scenes, and I'm looking at you, Leslie Lamond. Yeah. And at you, our conference hosts, our program committee, our board. So thank you all. I'm going to say one last thing to close. I want to offer one more little bit of heartfelt thanks, and that's to my husband, Bruce Kraushaar, who is sitting here tonight somewhere. That's not him. Yeah, not usually. Oh dear. Bruce's encouragement, patience, administration of therapeutic martinis, and especially playing host to many, many social events and graduate student pizza parties over the years, not only kept me going, but contributed enormously to our community in Madison. It also made him famous around Madison for his much-cited 3-hour rule. Now, I'm not going to reveal what that is, but you'll have to ask him at the reception when you see him. We have built a strong and a fine community here. I'm very glad to have had SCMS at my back across a long career, and how great to be a permanent member. I can come to every conference for the rest of my life. I think I may. Once again, thank you all so very much for this award.